Senate continues to consider the Bush tax cut plan, while the debate over its impact on the federal deficit wages on. The president apparently does not have the full support of his own party on the tax cut package. Congressman Mike Castle of Delaware, among several moderate Republicans, voted against it last week. Castle was one of 3 to vote against the bill, saying it will only worsen the nation's budget problems. Understanding the president's tax plan may mean understanding the Republican Party's tax stance. A University of Delaware associate professor, a tax attorney, has some insight. Sheldon Pollack wrote the book, Refinancing America, the Republican Anti-Tax Agenda. It's a look at the Republican Party and taxes dating back to the Civil War. He joins us tonight in our newsroom. As you are taking a look at what's going on with the Republican Party and the issues of taxes, it's quite timely with the debate that's going on inside the Beltway at this point. This is really a build on what you were talking about in 1996, correct?
Yes, it is, Nancy. This Republican effort to reduce taxes really fits in with what the Republican Party has been pushing for over 22 years, going back to the Reagan tax cut in 1981. We've seen a number of major tax bills. This one is an effort, remarkably, it would be the 3rd major tax cut bill during the Bush administration since the May 2001 tax cut. We're not quite sure what's going to happen here. There have been, as you mentioned, a number of Republicans, more moderates within the party, who have backed off their support and required a reduction from the White House's proposal, which was actually $725 billion over 10 years. The Senate has taken a more moderate position and authorized in the budget resolution, which is really what the politics is right now. The tax bill is set within the context of the budget. And the Republicans in the Senate, in order to accommodate the moderates, adopted a number of $350 billion over 10 years. That's much less than what the House Republicans want, and even much less still than what the Republicans in the White House were looking for.
Help me to see this on the timeline, especially since in your book you go back at least to the trends of the Civil War to today. What has changed? Has it been the party that has stayed the same, yet the people have changed? Or has it really just been same old with a few markers along the way? Well,
there's a remarkable consistency going back to the first income tax at the federal level was enacted in 1861, and it was opposed always by Republicans, the conservatives within the Republican Party. They were forced to accept it during the war, and again, during other periods, the Republicans acquiesced, but there's always been a strong undercurrent of anti-tax sentiment within the Republican Party. What changed very dramatically in 1995, the Republicans took control of the House, and a much more conservative group of Republicans pursued a much more dramatic and more radical anti-tax policy. And that's what we started to see with the 105th Congress and now the 108th Congress, certainly expressing a much more fundamental anti-tax policy. At the same time, the Republican Party lost some of its other major issues. The anti-communist wing of the Republican Party basically disappeared when the communist bloc in the Soviet Union disappeared in '89 and '90. And the Republican Party has expressed its basic underlying hostility to the large post-New Deal state through their tax policy. And that's, I think, what we're seeing now, an attempt to starve the social welfare state by cutting off its source. The main source of revenue for the federal government is the federal income tax.
So where does a moderate Republican, which seems to be perhaps the new generating minorities, possibly becoming more of a minority in Congress, where do they fit in?
Well, they are a real minority. They were squeezed out completely after 1995, and they're reasserting themselves in the last year. That's somewhat because the Republicans have very tenuous control over the Senate. But right now, I think the direction that's going is that the Republicans are going to get a tax bill. It's going to be some kind of a reduction in rates. The question is how big, and the main element of this bill is the reduction or attempt to eliminate the tax on dividends. And there's a real split within the Republican Party as to how to do that. That's a proposal that the Republicans themselves, the House and the Senate, have 2 different versions how to address the problem of what's called the double taxation of corporate income. And neither of the proposals, it's clear, really solves the problem. It's not all that popular either within business elements. It's kind of interesting that the securities industry has been very favorable towards this proposal, to eliminate the taxation of dividend income. But the rest of business interests are fairly lukewarm, especially corporate interests, which basically don't want to be forced or pushed to pay out dividends to their shareholders.
It's obviously a sign of how perplexing this debate is in Washington. As I said to you, I find this to be a trip to the rabbit hole very deep when I try to understand this tax plan. Your first suggestion to me was you want a copy of the book. We thank you for joining us tonight on Delaware Tonight to share your views about what's going on inside the Beltway that could affect all of us come April 15th of next year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Coming up, find out how a green thumb can add value to your house's resale. And it is the must-see for people who have their home for sale on the market or are just thinking about it. Details on All About Your Money, it is coming up next on WHYY Delaware Tonight.